realm of biblical interpretation, giants often find themselves overlooked, even by well-versed scholars and pastors. Yet, delving into the biblical text reveals their undeniable significance, particularly in the context of the Promised Land. The presence of giants played a pivotal role in Israel's hesitation to claim their inheritance, and it took individuals of extraordinary faith like Joshua, Caleb, and David to confront and conquer these imposing figures. Today, our focus turns to the historical chronicles of giants, centered around the renowned figure of Goliath and his brothers, the sons of God and giant Nephilim. The origin of giants is from the Nephilim. The Nephilim, introduced in Genesis chapter 6, verses 1 through 4, stand as the first giants in the biblical narrative. The commonly held interpretation suggests that these beings were the offspring of the union between the sons of God and human women. These sons of God are often understood to be spiritual beings or angels, as indicated in other passages of the Bible. The comparison in Genesis 6, 1, 2 to all humanity, rather than just specific lineages like Cain's, hints at their non-human nature. While some theories propose that these unions occurred between the lines of Seth and Cain, assuming Seth's line was righteous and Cain's was evil, the text itself doesn't make these claims explicitly. Other concepts, like the kingly line theory, need to fully explain the mighty Nephilim warriors' origin. The offspring of these unions, known as the Nephilim, are described as legendary and powerful men in Genesis 6, 4. Importantly, the term Nephilim is not synonymous with giants. The association between giants and the Nephilim comes from Numbers 13:32-33, where the giants are said to come from the Nephilim. This connection has led to misconceptions about the Nephilim being giants. The Septuagint translation of Nephilim and Gibborim as gigantes, giants, further adds to this confusion. It's debated whether the Nephilim ancestors inhabited Canaan, as the accounts of the Israelite spies in Numbers the 13th of May have been embellished. However, the mention of the Nephilim in Genesis 6, 4 as existing in those days and also afterward, and the reference to Anakim and the Nephilim in Numbers 13:33 imply the historical reputation of the Nephilim as giants. Genesis chapter 6 portrays God sending a flood to cleanse the world of all living things, including the Nephilim, referred to as all flesh. God renews the human race through Noah, seen as a new, untainted Adam. Noah's lineage is traced in Genesis 5, 1, 32, and his purity is emphasized in Genesis 6, 9. This untainted lineage is possibly a reference to his line remaining uncontaminated by Nephilim blood. Interestingly, giants returned to Canaan after the flood, highlighting the persistence of these legendary figures. Nephilim and Anakim in the land of Canaan. Numbers 13 is the pivotal chapter for our insight into the giants dwelling in Canaan. When the Israelites journeyed from Egypt and found themselves in the wilderness, poised to enter the Promised Land, Moses dispatched a dozen spies, each representing a tribe, to scout Canaan. Their task was to evaluate the strength of the inhabitants. After 40 days they returned, bearing a favorable assessment of the land's richness, exclaiming, "It flows with milk and honey, and this is its fruit." However, their outlook on the people dwelling there was less optimistic. The spies reported fortified cities, a robust population, and notably, the presence of the descendants of Anak. Many groups, such as the Amalekites, Hittites, Jebusites, Amorites, and Canaanites, also inhabited the region. While Caleb expressed a determined spirit to seize the land, the other spies, except for Joshua, voiced trepidation due to the perceived strength of the inhabitants. Their apprehension further escalated. Their description of the land they had scouted included vividly portraying its people as formidable giants, inhabitants of great height. They went so far as to identify them as Nephilim, the progeny of Anak. The spies' lack of faith resulted in harsh consequences. God decreed a 40-year wilderness wandering, corresponding to the 40 days of their surveillance. A plague claimed the lives of the 10 faithless spies, sparing only Caleb and Joshua. Nevertheless, the focus here is on the giants reported on the land. Were their accounts accurate? If so, their testimony would provide insight into the spies' fears. While it's plausible that the spies exaggerated their descriptions, this exaggeration likely has limitations. Moses corroborates their portrayal in Deuteronomy 9, 1-2, envisioning Israel conquering nations mightier and more populous, with towering Anakim, a people renowned for their height and strength. In truth, the people in Canaan, particularly the Anakim, possessed significant stature and power. So who were these Anakim? They descended from Anak, who had 3 sons, Sheshai, Ahiman, and Talmai. Joshua later eradicated most of the Anakim, leaving only remnants in certain cities like Gaza, Gath, and Ashdod. Notably, Goliath from Gath was likely an Anakim descendant. Caleb triumphantly expelled the Anakim from Hebron, previously known as Kiriath Arba, a name derived from Arba, the greatest man among the Anakim. Numbers 13:33 asserts that the sons of Anak come from the Nephilim, the sole explicit link between the Anakim and Nephilim in Scripture. While this assertion might seem to be a fabrication by the spies, aiming to bolster their case against entering Canaan, 3 reasons support its credibility. The first one is that Genesis 6:4 mentions Nephilim before and after the flood, and Numbers 13:33 clarifies the afterward part. The second reason is that Numbers 13:33 associates the sons of Anak with the Nephilim, hinting at the Anakim's origin. This link might explain the extraordinary height of the Canaanites. While some argue they were merely tall compared to the Israelites, evidence suggests they were genuine giants like Og and Goliath. So, if the giants stemmed from the Nephilim, how did this occur after the flood? 2 explanations stand out: whether comparable events occurred later, with spirit beings mixing with people, or whether Noah's daughters-in-law carried Nephilim genes. These women, unrelated to Noah, may have had Nephilim ancestry. Moses defeats Og of Bashan, one of the last Rephaim. After the flood, the presence of Nephilim seems to have continued, albeit less frequently than before. The Israelites reported encountering giants, known as the sons of Anak, when exploring the land of Canaan. Numbers 13:33. The term giant often refers to Rephaim in the Old Testament. The Rephaim is a recurring theme in the Old Testament narrative, first mentioned in Genesis 14. King Kedorlaomer subdued the Rephaim at Ashtaroth Karnaim, along with the Zuzim and Emim. These giants were mighty and were often associated with formidable armies. A coalition of kings, including Sodom and Gomorrah, challenged Kedorlaomer's dominance, leading to Abraham's intervention to rescue his nephew Lot. Moses recounted this history to the Israelites before they entered the Promised Land. He described the Rephaim, Zamzumim, and Anakim, alluding to their imposing stature. King Og of Bashan, the last member of the Rephaim, is mentioned in Deuteronomy 3. Og's defeat highlighted the power of God over even the mightiest adversary. In Deuteronomy 31:4, Moses assured the Israelites that God would grant them victory, as he did over the Amorite kings Sihon and Og. The Israelites faced many challenges en route to the Promised Land, but the message was clear: the battle belonged to the Lord. The Anakim, descendants of Anak, were a giant-like race residing near Hebron. 12 Israelite spies explored the Promised Land, and the report of the Anakim's size stirred fear. Caleb's faith in God's promises contrasted with the majority's doubt. Despite the initial fear, God reassured the Israelites and led them to victory. One of the last Rephaim, King Og, fell to Israel's forces. His enormous size and defeat underscored God's power. Different names among neighboring tribes, such as Emim and Zuzim, knew the Rephaim. Anakim, referring to powerful people with tall stature, inspired both awe and fear. In Joshua 12:4, Og is identified as the last of the Rephaim. His size, represented by his enormous iron bed, left an enduring image. The Israelites' journey, guided by God, saw them conquer territories and face giants. Through these events, they learned that the battle truly belonged to the Lord, and that faith was the key to victory. Joshua and Caleb drive out the Anakim. F.B. Meyer contrasted the perspectives of Caleb and Joshua, the 2 obedient spies, with those of the 10 disbelieving spies. Despite observing the same things during their survey of the land, Caleb and Joshua remained steadfast in faith while the others succumbed to panic. The difference lay in their outlook. Caleb and Joshua focused on God's power, while the rest compared themselves to the giants. This shows that external circumstances don't determine faith, but a heart that trusts in God's promises. Caleb and Joshua's optimism stood against the majority's fear. Although all 12 spies received the same promise, only 2 voted to proceed. The negative report spread, and the majority's disbelief spread through the camp. Their exaggerated view of the challenges led to rebellion against God's plan to enter the Promised Land. In contrast, Caleb and Joshua returned with a positive report, acknowledging the challenges, but emphasizing that God's power outweighed any obstacles. Despite the presence of giants, they believed that God's strength rendered them insignificant. The giants were like munchkins compared to God's might. This positive outlook was grounded in faith and trust in God. Deuteronomy 1:26-28 reveals the Israelites' rebellion, depicting them as grasshoppers due to their fear of the Anakim. Moses reassured them not to be afraid, but their refusal to trust God led to his anger. Consequently, except for Caleb, the evil generation was forbidden from entering the promised land. Many believe the Anakim were the ancestors of the Philistine giants, including Goliath. After 40 years and Moses' passing, the Israelites, led by Joshua, reclaimed the promised land from the Anakim and other giants. Only those in Gaza, Gath, and Ashdod remained. This marked the fulfillment of God's promise to his people. In Joshua 14, Caleb at 85 recalls God's assurance and expresses his determination to defeat the Anakim. While the Anakim and Nephilim are linked, they aren't the same. The Anakim were descendants of Anak, not of supernatural origin like the Nephilim. Both groups were so wicked that God intervened to eliminate them. Caleb and Joshua's faith earned them God's rewards. God desires to bless his children and show his strength through their challenges. The Nephilim were wiped out in the flood, and Anak's lineage ended with the fall of Jericho's walls. This showcases God's unmatched power and his ability to overcome any obstacles. David kills Goliath. What happened to the Rephaim in Joshua? In the book of Joshua, giants appear on several occasions. There's a recurring pattern of idolatry and deliverance in the book of Judges due to Israel's failure to altogether remove or destroy the inhabitants of Canaan. Giants reappear in the narrative in 1 Samuel, with figures like Goliath and his kin. As the Bible portrays, Goliath is perhaps the most famous giant in history. He was a Philistine champion known for his formidable presence. In 1 Samuel 17:4, it's noted that a champion from Gath named Goliath emerged from the Philistine camp. He was 6 cubits and a span tall. Goliath would have been about 9 feet 9 inches tall today, which would have made him a commanding figure. Goliath wasn't just known for his stature. He wore an impressive bronze armor suit, including a helmet and leggings, greaves, and carried a heavy bronze javelin and a massive iron-tipped spear. The armor weighed around 175 to 200 pounds. This armor featured a mail coat, a protective garment made with overlapping rings of bronze. Additionally, Goliath had a large shield bearer accompanying him to deflect incoming arrows. Goliath's challenge wasn't a one-time event. It spanned 40 days. He would appear daily, issuing a taunting challenge to the Israelites. Amidst this, a young shepherd named David visited his father's sheep near Bethlehem. He was too young to join the army and might not have understood Goliath's challenge. As events unfolded, David was sent by his father to check on his older brothers, who were part of Saul's army facing the Philistines. David arrived at the camp and heard Goliath's defiant challenge. David's curiosity led him to the battlefield. Seeing the fear among the Israelite soldiers, David asked about the reward for defeating Goliath and removing the shame from Israel. He questioned Goliath's audacity to defy the living God and declared his intention to face Goliath. David's determination reached King Saul, who initially questioned his ability due to his young age. However, David recounted how he had protected his father's sheep from lions and bears, and expressed his confidence that God would deliver Goliath into his hands. Saul offered David his armor, but it didn't fit, so David faced Goliath with his sling and a few smooth stones from a stream. As Goliath approached, David struck him with a stone from his sling, hitting him in the forehead. Goliath fell, and David used Goliath's sword to behead him. This victory spurred the Israelite army to pursue the fleeing Philistines. The story of David and Goliath is one of courage and faith, overcoming seemingly insurmountable odds. Some scholars propose that Goliath may have had a familial condition known as autosomal dominant inheritance, causing gigantism. While it's debated whether Goliath belonged to the Nephilim or Rephate race, his role as an imposing giant in the narrative remains central. David and his men finish off the giants. David and his men didn't only face Goliath, they also defeated 4 other giants from Gath. These events are recounted in 2 Samuel 21:15-22 and 1 Chronicles 20:4-8. Even great leaders like David experience challenges as they age. During a battle with the Philistines, David's strength waned, and a descendant of Goliath nearly killed him. David's weariness put him at risk during a battle between the Philistines and the Israelites. Ishbi-benob, a descendant of a giant who wielded a massive bronze spear, aimed to kill David with a new sword. Abishai, Zeruiah's son, intervened and killed Ishbi-benob, saving David's life. Subsequently, David's men expressed concern for his safety, urging him not to engage in battle, as he was the lamp of Israel. The conflict with the Philistines persisted, leading to further confrontations. Another descendant of the giant lineage, Saph, was defeated by Sibbecai. Elhanan, a Bethlehemite, slew Goliath's relative, who possessed a spear with a large shaft. In another battle, a tall Gathite man with 24 fingers and toes, likely related to Goliath, was slain by David's brother Jonathan. These accounts illustrate that even when leaders face challenges due to age or limitations, others can step up and achieve victory. David's influence and leadership were essential to these victories, but others demonstrated bravery as he stepped back from combat. The story also features an unnamed Gathite with 24 fingers and toes, possibly connected to Goliath's family. These Philistine warriors, sometimes called Raphaites or Rapha giant ancestors, belonged to a pre-Israelite Canaanite tribe known for their imposing stature. Goliath's story highlights God's immense power over adversity. It's a reminder that no matter how daunting challenges may seem, God's strength prevails. We're reminded not to underestimate God's presence and power, even in the face of overwhelming difficulties. After the reign of David, giants were no longer mentioned in the Bible. Today, slaying giants often symbolizes overcoming personal challenges and doubts. Just as ancient Israel faced giants in the Promised Land, we confronted spiritual obstacles. In a broader context, the Promised Land represents our world under Christ's rule. The struggles we face today, like disbelief and false teachings, must be conquered spiritually. Jesus triumphed over spiritual powers on the cross and will ultimately prevail. If you found this perspective intriguing, show your support by liking and subscribing to our channel for more insightful content. Please share your thoughts in the comments below, and let's continue exploring these meaningful themes together. Thank you for joining the conversation, and until next time, stay faithful and curious.